If there's one thing that's clear following this month's election results, it's that forces on the fringe won big. Across the country, political parties on the outside saw a sharp increase in support. Perhaps the clearest example of that was in the mixed city of Lod, a flashpoint of intercommunal violence during last year's riots.
I think the events on May 2021 were on the mind of the voters because the issue of security and personal security was the main issue of the election here in Lod.
The vote in Lod saw parties like the nationalist religious Zionism and anti-Zionist Balad significantly increase their support. In the 2021 elections, religious Zionism got 7.5% of the vote. Earlier this month, that soared to 15.5%. Balad got 15.7% these past elections, compared to just under 9% last year, when they ran together with Hadash and Tal. These results did not come as a surprise for Lior Benisti, a social activist in Lod. He says both religious Zionism and Balad have a strong base of support in Lod.
The notion of identity, of Jewish identity and Arab identity was much more apparent than the general subject the campaign was about. The big parties campaigned about the cost of living or Iran, whatever. That wasn't on people's mind. People thought about their life here in the city. People thought about the security.
Fidash Hade is a former city council member in Lod. She quit her position a month before last year's riots, following what she described as a pestering campaign by the Likud-backed mayor. Like Benisti, she also thinks last year's events played a key role in this month's vote.
One of the main things that we failed to do in the past year and a half is to build trust between us, the locals. I'm not talking about the municipality. They have no interest in doing that.
But there were other forces at play as well.
You can't ignore the fact that Sami Abu Shkhade, the head of Balad, is from Lod. Historically, we have a thing called son of the town, where one's hometown plays a factor. Another factor is that Balad were present. They were active in the grassroots level. And also, this was a protest vote against the other Arab parties who split away from Balad.
The city of Lod is perhaps the most prominent example where the election results saw an increase of strength from parties on the outside. It's not the only one. In other mixed cities like Akko, Ramle, Nofa Galil, both religious Zionism and Balad significantly increased their support. A testament that the wound from last year's riots is far from healed. In Ramle, religious Zionism went from 3.5% in 2021 to 12.5% these elections. On the other side, support for Balad grew from 6.2% when it ran with the Arab list to nearly 6% this time around on its own. In Akko, another city that saw fierce riots last year, religious Zionism nearly tripled their support between elections. And Balad alone received more than half the votes it got when it ran with other Arab parties. But Ola Najami Yosef from the Abraham Initiatives, a non-profit aimed at promoting peaceful coexistence between Jews and Arabs, says that's not necessarily the case.
The extreme and inflammatory discourse is a result of the discourse in the media or the political campaigns. It's not the people themselves who are getting more extreme.
Rather, she says, it's that life itself in those cities have become more extreme, prompting more and more protest votes like we saw these past elections.
The wound from last year's riots is still fresh, but you can't look at the data without looking at the general situation in mixed cities, a situation of neglect and years-long discrimination against the Arab population.
Fidash Hade believes that it's not that Lod itself has become more extreme, but the traumatic events of last year have not yet healed. One example of that is the killing of Musa Hassouna, a 31-year-old father of 3 from Lod, who was shot and killed during last year's riots.
For Arabs in Lod, as long as cases like these aren't solved, there will be no trust.
Last October, a district attorney dropped a case against 5 Jewish suspects in the killing in the claim that they were acting in self-defense.
There is a guy who was murdered in cold blood without a proper investigation. The person responsible for this is a minister from Likud, not religious Zionism.
Despite all this, locals in Lod are hopeful that the new incoming government will not stop the key progress that has so far been made in mixed cities in increasing intercommunal trust.